Well, Mike, let me thank you for joining me today. We're going to do this little interview thing and learn a little more about who Mike Saunders is,
Sure.
where he comes from, where he's at, and where he's going. So that'll be a good time. So let's start off a little bit of your background, like where Mike comes from. Who are you? How did you get where you are today?
I can pinpoint the exact moment that I became interested in computers. So I can, it's a very clear memory for me. So my mom was a librarian and a reading aide in the public school system where I grew up. And the teachers and staff could bring home, they could check out a computer on the weekends and then check one out all summer, actually.
Wow.
I was in elementary school, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, somewhere there. I'm not really sure. But I was playing some kind of game on an Apple IIe, AppleSoft basic type of game.
Yep.
And I did something where the computer was asking me a question, and I put in some input that made it break. And it said, break in 100.
Yeah.
I think is kind of what that error looks like. And somehow, don't remember, how I did it, but I was able to list the program. You could actually see the lines of code. And I realized that break in 100, like 100, it was asking me a question. I was like, that is the game. Like,
so you found the line of code in the game that was where it was messing up.
Yeah. And I was like, this is the game. And that at that point, that became more interesting to me than the game, right? Like, realized that there's this game and there's this code and you could change it and you could make it do, whatever you wanted. And so I started going to the library and checking out books on programming and learning how the computers worked. And always been curious about computers. And that curiosity, maintained. I never thought of it as a career option. Went to school to be a professional musician, and at some point I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. It's like, well, I need to find a job while I figure out what I'm going to do. And at that point, I was pretty good with Macs, and a local computer store was hiring someone to work on Macs. So I went there, started working on Macs, was learning Linux and some FreeBSD, that kind of stuff on my own time. And I was playing around with IP filter firewalls, I think, at the time.
That, yes.
And local bank needed someone to maintain their FreeBSD firewall that they had at the time. And I was like, well, I know that. I can help you out. At some point, they wanted to upgrade to a Cisco firewall. And I was like, well, I'm willing to learn that. So I learned that and just been curious about technology, learning all kinds of things, doing, different jobs. And eventually that kind of culminated in a security career.
That's so cool. The way things used to be has led us to get to where we are now. I kind of feel bad for the modern person who is now just going, hey, I'm kind of interested in technology, computers, maybe cybersecurity specifically. It didn't have the kind of cool organic way in which everything was new and exciting and you just got your hands on whatever you get your hands on. Computers are so ubiquitous now. They didn't have that. Well, this was like a really niche thing, and finding an error in a line of code which sparked an interest and got you to where you are. So that's a really cool impetus to where you started and how you got to where you are. Any big influencers in your career that you were like, man, this person was the big linchpin to kind of get me to where I am, or maybe a few people?
Yeah, there's few. My first security job, my boss Chad, I didn't know security. I didn't know security was a job. It was just something that you did as a system administrator. And at that point, I had been a Mac administrator, ran an ISP, knowing networking, Windows admin for small networks. So you did all of the things, database admin, web developer, was a developer for a bit of time. So I knew all kinds of things. And Chad hired me for the security position. And I really thought it didn't sound interesting. It just sounded like something I was going to do until I could get a better job. And it was eye-opening for me, and he said, I can teach you security. I can't teach you diversity of experience and curiosity.
Right.
And so, that's why I'm here, because I got that position. A few points after that, I was at a small con called Dakota Con, and I ran into Dave Kennedy and Eric Smith. And Dave invited me to DerbyCon, which was kind of opened my eyes to the fact that there's this community of like hackers and InfoSec people that were interested in the same things that I was interested in. And, going to DerbyCon and speaking there changed the directory of my career. And I was speaking because I had an idea, but I'm just some guy in North Dakota. I didn't know about this community. And I was talking to Eric Smith about this, and I was like, would you think this would be interesting? And he's like, why haven't you given this talk already? I was like, well, if this guy, thinks that this is a good idea, like maybe I should do that. And so, I gave a talk and started getting into speaking and getting active doing that. That was a huge moment. And then taking a class from Tim Medine at a SANS conference, and we just kind of hit it off and started talking. And so when he started Red Siege, pretty soon I came on board after that. So it's been a combination of doing the work, being curious, and being in the right place at the right time with the right people, and got me where I'm at today.
Yeah, it's do you still it seems like you struggled a little bit with imposter syndrome, the favored term in this industry, and I think for good reason. I know I struggle with it. You still struggle with imposter syndrome, feeling like you're just not that good.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because you see people doing this crazy, mind-blowing stuff all the time, and you're like, well, I didn't do that. At the same time, I look at some of the stuff that I've done that people are like, that's really crazy. And to me, it just seems like a really, just like stupid basic idea, but people are like, this is awesome, and I think a lot of us struggle with that. And because there's so much to know in this space, in cybersecurity, and we only know, this much, and there's so much that we don't know. And that starts to just be like, I don't know anything, because I know I'm at that point in the curve where I know how much I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's overwhelming sometimes. You think I have to know all the things, but you're like, you have to know how to research. You have to know how to ask the search engines the right questions to get the information you need, because there's no way you can know everything. And it would just be, you'd burn out trying to do it.
You ever meet someone that was just like, they seemed like they were a walking Wikipedia? They just happened to know everything about everything, or it seemed like they did?
Yeah, for sure. But, they knew those things. And I've ran into those people that you look up to, and they have everything. You seem like they know everything. And then at some point they're asking me a question. I'm like, why are you asking me? Like, who am I? But they felt like maybe I knew some information that they didn't know. And it turns out in many cases, you know something. And that's something I try to tell people who are newer in InfoSec. And they're like, well, I don't know anything. I couldn't give a talk on whatever. And I was like, I guarantee there is something that I don't know that could be useful to me. I could use it on a test. It could make my life easier in just day-to-day operations. There are things that everyone knows that other people don't know. And so we all have things to share, and we can all learn things from everyone.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It doesn't matter what stage of the game you're in. If you're looking at the screen and you see that the semicolon is missing, and the seniors are standing around going, why does this not work? It's okay to go, I know I'm new to this, but isn't there supposed to be a semicolon there?
Yeah.
And them go, oh my goodness, we did not see that. You're absolutely right. So do not be afraid, right? Would that be some good advice to the new?
For sure. For sure. Don't be afraid to, share knowledge and put yourself out there, because there's going to be other people who can benefit from that information.
Yeah. And speaking of sharing knowledge, as you mentioned, you've done a lot of, speaking at conferences. You also do some training as well. And that's what you've been here. We've been training all week. It's been awesome. We had a great time doing that. What about those things is super important to you and that's why you do them?
Everyone has things that they're good at and they're not good at, and some people are not really good at kind of public situations. and public speaking, and that's fine. That's something that I think maybe being a musician and having to perform in front of people,
it does help,
has given me that level of comfort. And I think that I'm fairly adept at public speaking. Like, I like to think that I am, based on the feedback I've received. That's a strength that I have that not everyone has. So that's something that I can do. And I'm really passionate about doing. Most of my talks are kind of 101 level talks, because I want to make that information accessible to people who are getting in. And that's something that I'm really good at. So, or I like to think that, I'm good at. So I do that. Something that I can give back by helping educate people, where not everyone can do that. But if that's something that I can do, I feel like I must do that, because people have given so much to me. I'm where I am because people put me in situations and shared information with me. If I can do that to give back, then, I kind of have to.
What is it like to be a senior consultant for a cybersecurity firm that does pen testing and red teaming? What's a day-to-day? What gets you excited about doing that? What doesn't get you excited about doing that? Show us some of the dark corners that most people don't talk about, and illuminate what is this job like. So for the people that are out there, they're looking to get into it, they get a really realistic view of what that's going to be like if they end up there.
So the fact that I get to do a job that would be a felony if I don't have a contract for it is pretty cool. Like, it's really cool to be like, I would get arrested for this if someone didn't have a piece of paper that said, I want you to do this.
It's funny. It feels like a lot of cybersecurity people that deep down, they would be a criminal if it wasn't for the penalties behind it.
I mean, crime might pay for a short period of time, but cybersecurity pays pretty well.
It does.
I don't have to be looking over my shoulder.
Right.
So, that's pretty cool. The problem solving, I've been an internal security person and I've been a consultant, and both are great positions. The nice thing about being internal is you can go really, really deep, and you start to have that knowledge of your network and understand how it works, so you can come up with maybe some more crazy attack paths because you've got that knowledge. Where me coming into your network, I might not know about those things, and it would take me a long time to get there, so I might not see some of the things that you would see as an internal pen tester. But that, by that same token, coming into new environments all the time, running into new technologies every day, means that I have to solve new puzzles all the time, and run into some piece of technology, be like, I have no idea what this is. Let me pull up a man page, or, pull up the manual and get up to speed real quick about what is this, and try to become an expert in it really quickly, because a lot of what we're doing is really just advanced system administration. One, how do I abuse how this thing works? And being a former sysadmin, what are some of the decisions that a sysadmin would make to make their life easier if they had this system? Try to get in that mindset, because people are going to take shortcuts and try to, like, what are the shortcuts that this particular person took? That day-to-day operation is, people getting in want to think that it's all hacking, and it's not. There's a lot of stuff that's not hacking. There's a lot of waiting for scans to get done, waiting for someone to interact with your phishing campaign, waiting for clients to get you the information you need to start the test or provision the access that you need to do the test. There's reporting, which lots of people are really down on reporting. They hate it. And honestly, I love it. The reports that I write are my legacy, because at the end of the engagement, without that report, maybe I pulled off some cool hacks, but there's nothing. This report is my legacy that says, I was here, this is what I found, and this is how you fix it. And hopefully, if I've done my job well, my client is in a better position at the end of the engagement than they were before. And the only way that happens is that I can effectively convey what the problem is and what the resolution is. And so there's a lot of reporting, and it's critically important to what we do. And, there's calls with clients because I might be on a test this week, but I have a test next week. So I got to get that kicked off. And then I have to do a debrief with the clients before, which is really fun too, getting to do that and interact with people you might not have gotten to interact with on the test. And I have to convey sometimes really highly technical things in terms that business can understand. Because at the end of the day, right, like it's about enabling the business to be successful. And if I give you this highly technical thing and I can't put it in business terms, the business goes like, to an executive, oh, they compromised Active Directory. That maybe doesn't mean a whole lot. But we were able to go from this standard accounting user to taking over, all the healthcare data and being able to expose and steal all the healthcare data, for instance. Or we would be able to shut down the entire network very simply starting from this position and putting that business impact and helping them understand that. That's something that's pretty cool to be able to do that.
Yeah, I bet you've been on some very, we'll say, interesting debrief calls from time to time. I'm sure they don't always go, well, we had a couple of findings and here you go. You do these remediations and you should be good. I'm sure that you've every now and then have been like, oh no, this is going to go bad. And I think we were even talking about one where people were like, I didn't even know that was happening. What's going on?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get into situations where people have been told that a problem's been fixed and you've exposed that it in fact hasn't, and can get in some uncomfortable situations there and be like, I'm sorry, I'm not privy to what happened previously before I got here, but I can tell you that this is the state of affairs as of the day we did the test. Yeah. And you're telling people sometimes that their baby's ugly, and you have to do that in a diplomatic way and not blame people. We're not placing any blame. We're just saying like, look, we've identified a problem. This is the impact and this is how you resolve it. And people sometimes can be pretty upset that you found things, not necessarily upset at you. They're upset that those things exist and then trying to use diplomacy to smooth that over.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. We've talked about some of the things that are very specific, but in kind of a roundabout way to the skill set that goes along with being a part of the job. It seems like there is a specific set of skills that could be, I feel like Liam Neeson, right, from Taken. I have a specific set of skills that will help me be a pen tester. What would you say are the most quintessential skills that anyone that would want to enter that line of business that would help them be successful in that?
Curiosity is the first thing. I can take someone that doesn't know tech, but if I can tell them about a problem in a general way, and they get that, they're like, wait a second, that's not right. Or, you're working with an application, you're on a web page, and you put in a particular input, and the error, the application gives you an error. Instead of just being like, I don't know, I got an error. The people who are like, but why did it give me that error? Why did it say that specific thing? You can teach at that point because that curiosity is there. When I see a button that says do not press, I'm immediately curious about why can't I press the button? What happens if I press the button? So being curious, being willing to learn and be uncomfortable, because you're not going to be an expert and you're going to get thrown into new environments all the time that you know nothing about. And you have to very quickly be able to orient yourself, understand what you're seeing, and looking up information about what you're seeing. You got to be able to understand that and figure out how can you use or abuse that to further the objective of gaining access, finding vulnerabilities, and making the client better. So curiosity, being able to research and being comfortable being uncomfortable. Persistence. I think you and I were talking about it yesterday. If you feel like there's a thread there, and if I pull on that, like this is going to go somewhere. Yeah. And sometimes getting that first thread out is really tough. But being persistent, knowing that you can do it, at the same time knowing when to walk away. At least with my business, the clients aren't hiring us to laser focus on one thing. They're trying to find as many things wrong as possible. Unless there's a specific thing that they did, we're generally trying to find as much as possible. So sometimes being able to say, look, I believe there's a problem here. Here's the information you need to further research yourself, but I'm moving on. And knowing when to move on so that you get that bigger picture.
Can that judgment be cultivated and cultured, or is that something that's just kind of an inherent nature thing?
I think it can be cultivated for sure. And it's a matter of like working with your team. And in my position as, a senior, checking in with my team, seeing how they're doing on a regular basis. How are you doing? And being like, I think we need to move on. At the same time, as a junior, being like, look, I've spent half a day on this thing. I feel like there's something there, but I don't know what to do. Sometimes, hey, I need some help. And the answer might be document it and move on at this point. Like it's better. Or being comfortable calling up the client and saying like, look, this is where I'm at. What do you want to do? Being able to be flexible. And then maybe they say, you know what, we really want you to focus on that. Being able to communicate effectively. So working on your writing, reporting's very important. Being able to write well, clearly, succinctly, convey the problem quickly without a bunch of dazzling, hype, if you will, just like these are the facts, ma'am. Written as well as speaking to people and being able to speak in highly technical terms and being able to speak in very general business-oriented terms, because we're talking sometimes to different crowds, and being able to read the room and knowing the right way to say it. I think those are probably the biggest skills.
Mike, are you involved in when Red Siege is looking to take on new consultants and testers? Are you a part of that hiring process at all?
Yeah, for sure.
Give some advice to someone who's trying to or going to get into this career, and they're going to have those interviews. How can they best present themselves to give them the best possible chance at getting their number pulled?
A lot of it is culture fit. Like, is this person going to be a good fit for our team? And trying to read how that person is going to be. If someone comes off as being very, I know everything, it might not work very well. So one of the things that I'm going to do, or someone on the team is going to do during the interview process, is get you to a point that you're willing to admit you don't know the answer. Because if you're not willing to admit you don't know the answer, that's problematic. Like you have to be willing to say, I don't know. And you have to be comfortable saying, I don't know. Clients will ask me about something all the time. I'm like, honestly, I don't know about that. I'm willing to research it, but I don't know the answer to that. So what we're looking for is people to demonstrate that they're willing to learn, and that they are able to learn, and that they're able to take feedback. You can get the impression that sometimes you're like, I can't tell this person anything. Like, doesn't matter how smart you are, I don't think this is going to be a good fit for either of us.
Yeah, I think we were talking about one of the Red Siege team members, and you said that they were really good at when you had to tell them, okay, you've made a mistake on something, that they were really good at going, okay, that's fine. I made a mistake. I can admit to that. Why is that a mistake? Because I don't understand it. And that was like a super valuable trait.
Absolutely. Yeah. Knowing that we're all going to make mistakes, being able to accept that feedback, and it's not an attack. You can provide context to be like, well, this is why I did that, to help understand. And so I can help that course correction, but not be, well, I did that because blah.
Yeah, you're being defensive.
Being defensive, right. Like, we're not giving the feedback to try to say like, you're a bad person and you're a bad tester. Like, look, we're all trying to do better. And, this is how we get better, And so I want my team to give me feedback when I'm doing things that aren't necessarily great as a leader. Maybe I'm failing as a leader and I need to step that up. I need to step up my game. I need that feedback. if I'm not getting better, I can't help them get better.
I love that, right? Door swings both ways, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Obviously, you've had a pretty good career so far. You've been in this business for a little while. I think you said you've been in over 20 years at least, right?
Almost 30 years.
How have you seen, for better or for worse, the pen testing security consultant space change in your time in it?
I became familiar with the idea of pen testing in the 2000s. I was part of a job that was working for a publicly traded company, and as part of being that publicly traded company, we needed to have pen test done. And I was like, what is a pen test? Like, I don't understand this. Like, click. Like, no, penetration test. Like, the guy's explaining to me what he's doing, learning about that. I was like, oh, this is really cool. How can I do this when you're not here? So I started becoming familiar with that. And really just kind of scan-based. It was more like a vulnerability assessment, not a penetration test. Sure. We ran Nessus. Here's your report.
Yeah, it spits out report.
Did you validate those findings? No, we didn't validate the findings. Nessus found it. Like, okay, that's a vulnerability assessment. Starting to see firms becoming more focused on that manual testing for validation, and then getting outside the scanner. I don't use, like, when I'm doing an assumed breach test, Nessus has no part of that. It doesn't make sense for what we're doing. And getting into much more manual testing, manual validation, and exploring those attack paths that you're just not going to find necessarily with a scanner. Like, in AD, we've got Bloodhound. It can help us understand a lot about Active Directory. Mm-hmm. But it can just say, here's the relationships, here's the permissions. It's still up to me to manually validate whether or not that condition is exploitable and what the impact of that is. And so seeing more and more firms picking up that manual testing and just outside the scanner type of testing flow has really changed. The penetration testing game has gotten a lot more sophisticated.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the job market itself. We were kind of talking about this yesterday. We both kind of agree that cybersecurity, as far as doing pen testing, maybe even SOC analysts, might not necessarily be a quote unquote entry-level job. But we see that kind of build that way a lot. This is an entry-level cybersecurity, entry-level pen tester. And junior pen tester is a fine title for something, but you have to have quite a bit of knowledge to be a SOC analyst or a junior pen tester. Would you agree to that?
I mean, yes and no. I think it's possible to have that entry-level SOC analyst or junior pen test position where you come in with really no information, mm-hmm. no experience, but that means that team has to have the capacity and ability to invest in training that individual, which means they might not be billable for 6-8 months where they're in internal schools. And there are companies that do that. I know that there are bigger companies that have that ability, that basically have an internal university, and you get hired in the first 6 months, you're enrolled in tech boot camp. Like, that is possible, but most companies don't have that.
Right.
And if the company doesn't have that, it's really hard to come in with no experience, because so much of what we do is context. So I think that, starting out in a help desk position and understanding all kinds of issues, and help desk, for companies, they are the AWACS of the security program. Like, they are going to know there's a problem before anyone else knows a problem.
Boots on the ground, right?
Boots on the ground. So that's a great position to be in. Be a server administrator, be a network administrator, be a developer. Those types of things will make you a more effective tester. Nowadays, like, there's university programs that you can go to learn that, and that might be a really effective way to do it. It's not my experience, so it's hard to relate to. For people who don't have the experience and want to get in, virtualization is cheap these days, right?
Indeed.
You've got VirtualBox, you got Proxmox and an old computer sitting around, and you can virtualize all the things. We didn't have that. Back in the day, I had 12, 15 computers in my bedroom running all kinds of different, operating systems and doing things. And now
your electricity bill was insane.
Yes. And now we can do that inside one machine, and so get familiar with as many things as possible, because that context will make you more effective at being a security analyst, at being a penetration tester, at being, a network security administrator.
I think that your answer there has really gone a long way to kind of solve a lot of the paradox of entry-level job must have 1-2 years experience in those job posts, right? So you see a junior, you see an entry-level security position. A lot of times they are requiring this 1-2 years of experience, maybe even more, for these positions. And it's like, well, if this is the case, then that you would have that. And if we kind of shift that Overton window of security and not like, it's not an entry level in the same way that A+ is or help desk is, but there are entry level cyber jobs once you have that background. And that's where you can say, well, yeah, I do have that 1-2 years. Would you think that that's kind of like a bit of solving that conundrum?
Like, that's a definition problem, calling it entry level. And we say it's entry level, but then we require experience. So obviously it's not entry level. It's somewhere above entry level. And that's a problem with the HR system, across the industry, and expectations. We want a bunch of experience, but we don't want to pay you for that experience. And I think you and I had a conversation about gaming the system. Let's say you're on the help desk. Do you have a security team? Make friends with the security team. Find out what they're doing. Ask questions. Make yourself known. If you don't have a security team that you can do that with, what's your community look like? Do you have a DEF CON group? Do you have some type of computer security group in the area? If you don't, get on some Discords, get on some Slacks, start networking with people. It's really set up for entry-level people to fail because the HR filters are almost impossible to get by. And I think that you get around that in human space. We know people, we use those relationships and then say like, oh, hey, John, I know you work at XYZ. They've got a position open. Could I give you my resume? And when that comes in that way, you kind of bypass the HR filter. And I think that is, unfortunately, right or wrong, the better way to approach trying to get a job, because the requirements and expectations are unrealistic. And it depends on the company. Some companies are going to be like, I need documented resume experience. And other companies are going to be like, okay, so you set up this lab at home and I can see you've been playing CTFs. You're active in problem solving on CTFs, and you've got a GitHub, and you've got a blog. Maybe you spoke at a local B-Sides type of thing. Those kinds of things are experience. They're not work experience, but they're experience with the technology and the industry and the concept. And I think that those are valid, means of experience. We can present ourselves. You do have experience. You just don't have work experience. But
yeah, I love that you brought up the idea of the human interfacing, right? The networking with people, going to cons. They're just so much fun. I can't tell you. I mean, we've had so much fun at cons together. We've met so many great people and built relationships with them. You do get to become a known entity. Someone that is looking for someone in that space gets to say, well, I know Alice, I know Jill, I know Jerry, I know Bob, and they're a known entity. I know they're going to be a culture fit. I know kind of what their skill set is because I have a relationship with them.
Yeah.
And even if I don't have an opening, I know somebody that does, and I can kind of send them that way, and just having that. So I love that you brought that up because I have seen that myself, and that's just a great piece of advice. That I think is probably one of the best pieces of advice.
In an ideal world, we wouldn't have to do that.
Right.
It would just be like, here's my experience, here's my resume, I'm qualified to do it. But unfortunately, the system doesn't really support that model. It should, but all evidence points to the fact that it doesn't.
What's up next for you? What's your future look like? Where are you headed on your career path?
I don't know. What I know is there are lots of things that I don't know.
Yeah.
And there's lots of things I want to know. And there are lots of things that I'm going to want to know that I don't even know about now, right? Like,
this is the best sentence I've ever heard in my life, by the way.
So for me, it's just continual learning, looking for blogs that are being published, whether that's on Twitter or LinkedIn or some other source where people are sharing information, seeing it in a Slack, seeing someone's new research, digging into it. How can that be used to in my daily life as part of my workflow?
Any specific topic that has captured your imagination as of late that you're like, ooh, I got to learn more about this?
I think one thing that I need to focus on is initial access. Assumed breach, we're starting with that assumption that a breach has happened, so we're inside. But clients do sometimes want that initial access vector, and that has gotten harder and harder in recent years. And it seems like the attack surface is getting smaller and smaller. And so figuring out the effective ways to exploit that attack surface. And there's a lot of research for me to do in that area, training that could be done, a lot of reading, and a lot of practice. So that's probably what's next for me, like from a learning and a skills perspective, but constantly just trying to improve what I can do and how I operate, and building new tools that make my life easier and making my team's life easier, and just being a better Mike, essentially.
Awesome stuff. Well, Mike, thanks so much for joining us for this interview and learning more about who Mike is and what he's doing. And thanks for stopping by the studios and lending yourself to us, and Red Siege for letting us have you for the week to make a really awesome course. I think people are going to really dig it, and it's going to be helpful for them to skill up in their career and make them more successful. So again, thanks just so much. And I can't wait to do something with you, hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I had a great time.